Wow, we sound alive. It sounded good. So Jesus, right since the beginning of this Sermon on the Mount and through chapter 6, has been exploring this close relational connection with the Father, right, that he's opened up for disciples that come to him to know God through Jesus Christ. This is what this chapter 6 and 7 has been about. If you remember, right, through generosity, through prayer, through fasting, through not being religious hypocrites, you find this possibility of a new way of life in close relation to this Father, right? So in this section really hones in on what it takes to sustain that, right? What kind of life habits or practices sustain that sort of life and that mindset? And so for Jesus, like he said so many times, he brings it back to this idea of prayer. That prayer is just this basic habit in the life of a disciple. And these are probably well-known words for a lot of us. We've probably heard this said a lot. But if you would, please turn to Matthew 7, and we're going to read 7 through 12. So Matthew 7, 7 through 12. 1,599. That's the page number. Here we go, 7 through 12. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. The one who knocks, the door is opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So in everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this sums up the laws of the prophets. We probably have heard these words before. Probably summarized as this: ask, seek, knock. Okay? We've heard it's ask, seek, and knock. One more time. It's a really simple teaching. It's not really hard to understand his words. But I probably think there's a few of us that if we really carefully thought through the implications of these three simple and beautiful words about prayer, that we maybe have some trouble with it. Because think about how he depicts it. He says, prayer is asking for stuff. I mean, that's how he defines it in the most basic way. How do you talk about this relationship of intimacy with the Father? It's asking for things, because it's ask, seek, knock. And that's really optimistic, isn't it? Ask, and what happens when you ask? You ask, and then you shall receive. Ooh. Do you notice how, though? It kind of ramps itself up a little bit. It ramps up this intimacy. So asking is your basic request, and then so you ask, and then you wait to receive. But what comes next? You ask, then you seek. That's kind of stepping up the game a little bit. It's like you both asked for it, but then you took a little bit of initiative, and you stepped out, you made a move, looking for the response to that request. This is that. But then you get to the persistence of it. So first you, then you, but then you knock. It's this persistence. So it's not just you asked, you went to look for it, and there's this persistence, this knocking. This is what Jesus depicts as the Father, right? As not somebody who's like holding out. That God is someone who is eager to serve. Look how he depicts him. God depicts God. He depicts God as this imaginary here Father, and the image that he uses in this section is really personal, and it gets really real. There's probably a whole bunch of us in this room that have images of sort of a day-to-day life. Maybe you have little kids of your own. Maybe you've watched children, but really early in their toddler phase. If you've ever been around little tiny kids, your relationship to a tiny human is basically them asking you things all the time. Yesterday in the car, my daughter must have asked every question you could possibly have thought to have asked in a car. But that's kind of the deal. It's just kids asking you things all the time. That's how that relationship at toddlerhood works. They ask a lot of questions. And I've been thinking about this teaching, right, since I sketched this outline a year ago. And over the last few weeks, this image has popped into my head about what this story reminds me of. It happens usually on Saturday mornings in our house. Charlie emerges from her room, hopefully at a good time, not too early, and she's 4 now. And so we have this game that goes on Saturday morning. She comes out of her room, we can hear her open the door, and she gets to where the gate is at the stairwell, and she stands there, and she says, "Is it wakey time? Is it time to get up?" We say yes, and she comes down with her blankets and maybe a couple books, and she comes in and she gets up on the little foot thing at the end of our bed, and she crawls up and she pushes our dog out of the way, and she gets right in between Ashley and I at 7, 6, whatever time it is, and she lays in bed with us and she reads or whatever. But we say yes, and she comes down with all those things, and she's so happy. She's just it's like the greatest moment of her entire life. I don't know how long that's going to last, but right now I'm enjoying it. When she's 17, it might be a little, but that's this image that I have in the mind, that she doesn't even hesitate at the top of the stairs to ever ask us on a Saturday morning. It could be 3 a.m, and she's like, "Is it time to get up? I would love to come down and cuddle in bed with you," right? No hesitation. She doesn't wonder if we're going to say no, right? We say yes a lot. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's the tendency of a parent, right? Because we love that relationship, we have a tendency to just want to say yes. And so this is how Jesus is depicting the Father, right? He just says, if you ask, the Father, He loves you, He'll give it to you, and you will receive. And it's really simple. It's not complex. What makes this complex for us is this response we have to it. And it's probably the response that everybody sitting in the room is having when I say it's really simple. You ask for it, and God gives it to you. You think through these words, and you think about the way, I've asked and I've asked and I've asked, and nothing ever happened. Or maybe I asked and I thought it was weird, like, doesn't God already know everything? So why do I even need to bother to ask at all if He just knows what He's going to do? But many of us it's not hard to understand, but we have these obstacles to this face value teaching of prayer that Jesus has. Ask and you receive. We go, well, I've done that. Probably a lot of us have a feeling like that. And what we're going to get started at here, right, in the Gospel of Matthew, we've gone through this a whole bunch, but in chapter 18, He'll say things to the disciples. He'll say things like, wherever 2 or 3 of you are gathered together in my name, I'm in the midst of them. And whatever they ask in my name, they'll receive it. And then later in chapter 21, He'll say things like, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can move the mountain. You can ask anything and trust you'll receive it. These are just a couple of teachings that Jesus has about prayer that all look at this sort of face value nature of it. It's very important to Him, and it's usually repeated in this theme, right? That most of us struggle with. That if you ask, you get it. And I know I've struggled with it, and I know that's probably true for so many of us in here. Now, I've met a small handful of people who are Jesus followers throughout the years that somehow they pray and things just seem to happen for them. They're great people to have as friends, by the way. Really good people to have as friends. They just seem to coincidences happen to coincidences in their life. A friend of mine, they needed a car. And he was a pastor at a church. They couldn't get a car. And some guy just drove a truck in and said, I think you might like a truck. And they gave him keys to a truck. Coincidence on coincidence, right? There's just some people get this, it just comes together for them. But I don't think that's most of us. I think most of us, we pray for something for a long time, and it might never happen, or if something happens, it's kind of like in a weird way, we weren't sure that's exactly what we meant when we were praying for that. I guess maybe that could be the answer. Or we think and we pray, and it just kind of is left unanswered. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to move into this a little bit, into what I think the 3 challenges we have about seeking in prayer in this way to trust Jesus' words at face value. Because with what he's describing here, if I haven't experienced it, is there something wrong with me? Is it maybe I've misunderstood, or is there some other implication that I haven't thought all the way through? I think you can boil down most of the obstacles in our wrestling match with this idea of prayer in a really simple way. It's difficult for so many of us to actually trust Jesus' description about the character of God, of the Father, this loving, generous, and eager person to say yes. I think for many of us, that's just a vision of God that we don't really have categories for. And it's hard for us to believe fully that is 100% true. And that connects to the second biggest challenge And this is going to be a really deep rabbit hole, so we're going to go surface here. Like, how does prayer actually work? And if it does work, right, how does it work? How does that relate to God being this eternal presence and purpose for all of human history if he already knows everything? And like, why do I need to ask for it? We have really simplistic reductions of the complexity of that sort of question, and it lands us in a complete dead end. For some of us, there's an emotional attachment to that problem. For some of us, it's an intellectual challenge to that question of how prayer works. And lastly, it's an issue with experience, because we've had endless experiences of praying and asking what seemed like really good things to happen that never did. So we just don't pray. And that's a tragedy, and it really misses the very simple and utterly profound things that Jesus invites us to when talking about prayer in this way. So we're going to work our way through those three things, and it's connected all to the ways that we're going to let Jesus' words open up the meaning for all of this. So the very first one, right? Jesus anticipates it's going to be really difficult for us to trust God's character, that this is who the Father is. And so he goes to it right at the very beginning. And so he encourages us in these three things, which are and then knock, right? So he's got a bold promise of receiving. Of finding a door being opened, and then he moves right into this issue of God's character. And it's this image that he gives of the loving, attentive parent, this father, who wants to be asked and is eager to give good things on being asked. So let's read it again to see this image, and then we'll go from there. Here's what he says. Verse 9. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, would give him a stone? Or if he asks fish, would give him a snake? If you then, though are evil, know how to give good gifts, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? Jesus is using this image of a child asking for something that's necessary, right? Just daily bread. We prayed that in the Lord's Prayer, our daily bread, right? And he says, is anybody going to give your kid that comes up to you and is like, I need some bread, I'm very hungry. And you're going to be like, well, I have good news for you. I have a rock. Right? Remember now, go all the way back to the beginning with the Beatitudes. He's talking to a hillside of people that are mostly poor. They're working class Galilean folks. They're not aristocrats of Rome. They're the outcasts. They're all these things. They're Jewish folks that are just hanging out on the margins. And he's counting on them to answer this question deep down inside. He said, which of you, if your son asked you for bread, is going to give him a stone? And he knows deep down the hillside answer everyone's going to give. Everyone's going to say the answer to that is no, right? Nobody would do that. Not even these outcast Galileans that no one is talking about, no one cares about. This is what he's doing. He's bringing the audience in this. He's saying, listen, you're all amazing people made in God's image, but you're really screwed up. We've been through this with the Sermon on the Mount so far. And that's not really news to you. And so the teaching of Jesus, right, we're screwed up, but Jesus banks on this core intuition that all humans have, and certainly parents have, that if your child asks you for something that is absolutely necessary, you're not going to give them something completely useless or that's going to hurt them, right? You're not going to give them a stone, and if they ask for something else, you're not going to be like, well, here's a poisonous snake. I don't know, is this helpful to you in any way? It's a very basic thing that he invites us into. He says, now think about that. If you, the dysfunctional, screwed up human beings that have this gut instinct deep down inside, if you've got that, how much more so does the Father? It's simple, because what he's asking you to do is just envision that God is not out to get you, but that God's basic posture towards you is one of eagerness in this relational intimacy. The eagerness to provide what's good. For some of us, for a lot of reasons, it could be the way that we were raised. Maybe you had parents that modeled what it means to you in ways that were to be parents in like really distorted ways. So it's hard to envision a parent that acts that way to have that much generosity and love. But the opposite could be true, that you have parents that were maybe a little too present. So that it was like a controlling kind of parent, and so you never could actually measure up, right? But in this whole dilemma, so it's hard for you to envision a father that's not there to perpetually criticize you, but it's actually there to support you. And so we struggle deeply with this image that Jesus gives us with this metaphor. And once you understand it a little bit, it starts to unlock a few things, because Again, notice how the teaching is set up. It's and then what? We didn't sound alive. It's and then good. And then it's this Father-Son image. So we get ask, seek, knock, and then we get this Father-Son image set up. Now, if you were to take verses 7 and 8, which is the ask, seek, knock verses, and you were to like rip them out of context, so there's like, the context of the text dripping off of it, and you were to just throw it over there for a minute, and then you take this other one about, all this stuff, like seek in my name, and it'll be answered, and you take, little bits of it here and there. What you get is a theology based on these teachings that's very distorted. And this is what a lot of people have ended up with. And we'll just call it blank check prayer. Blank check prayer, which is if you take ask, seek, knock, and you take it right there, you ask for it, and you get it. And it's really sweet. I love it. It's so good. You should try it. I really recommend it. For some people, they rationalize this blank check theology, right? This prayer, even though it doesn't work really well for them a lot of times. But they'll find ways to make it work. They say, this is what it says. I'm going to just take it right here. I found my parking spot. There it is. I've received the answer to the thing I've been, whatever. You can sustain that for quite a long time. And for some people, this is what they think. They take this blank check. I ask it, and it will be delivered to me. No questions asked. But maybe Jesus is teaching something more nuanced than that, because if we take ask, seek, knock, and we put it back in and we drop it back into context, what we get is right after it this image of this parent and the child and the Father and the Son, right? So just think through that. How many of you in here are parents? This will be intuitive. How many of you in here have been parented before? This will be intuitive. I think that's everybody in the room. I think that's almost everybody now. This will be very intuitive. I've got Charlie, I've got Ryan, right? And Ryan, my relationship to Ryan is mostly her asking me for things, even though she can't speak, right? She points, she grunts, she reaches for things on tables. This is what she does. Doesn't matter what it is. Could be a knife, could be a burning hot pan on the stove. It could be spicy salsa. Are you with me? It doesn't matter what it is, she wants it. She comes up to me, she wants me to pick her up, and then she reaches out for whatever it is that I've got near me. You can imagine in her head the sounds she would make if she could speak. She would just say to me, I want that. You with me, parents? You know what I'm talking about? You remember when you were a kid too, Elena, and you just wanted stuff? Do you remember that far back? Kind of, yeah. You with me, parents? You know this time frame when they're just about to enter toddlerhood and they just want everything you have in your hand. Doesn't matter what it is. Do I want Ryan to eat the salsa that I'm making with jalapeno peppers in it? Do I want her to drink hot chocolate at every single meal just because somebody made it? Or coffee? Do I want her to pick up my really sharp knife that I'm cooking dinner with and chop stuff? Do I want her to do those things? No, right? Am I excited for the day that she and I can sit down with a cup of coffee and demolish a bowl of delicious salsa while watching the Indiana Hoosiers play in the college football national championship game? The answer is obviously yes. But that's not where we're at right now. You with me? There's nothing in me that wants to tell her no, because I think spiced salsa is delicious. I think hot chocolate is good. I think learning knife skills at a young age is a positive experience. But I can't say yes. Let's imagine that I never say no to her again. Okay, that sounds awesome. Can I play with those tiny Legos, Dad? Like she's reaching for Charlie's little Legos that are like small, and Ryan goes over for them, and I go, you know what? That's fine. I know you could put those in your mouth and choke on them, but today I'm a yes man. Certainly Jesus wants us to think this through. There's a wise parent who wants what's good for their children. This is the metaphor he gives. Does the wise parent always say yes, no matter what is asked? Does the wise parent say yes, no matter what is asked? No. Good, we're alive. Okay, good, great. Whew. No, the wise parent does what's good for their children. Now just think through that for a second. Jesus isn't saying that the parent is really irresponsible. Right, if I were to do that with my daughters, Charlie would live on hot chocolate and candy and would watch Zaboomba probably nonstop in our home. And Ryan would choke on Legos and cut herself on knives. And would probably never trust the food I hand her again. right? Because I'd give her some of my guacamole that I put habanero peppers in, and she would never trust food I hand her ever again. They don't have this capacity yet to determine what's good for them. That's part of my role, and Ashley's role in being a parent, is your wisdom to show love and to show them a secure, safe place. You have a dual responsibility, to love them but also protect them. You can ask whatever you would want. Charlie can ask me for anything in the whole world, and I'll always be there to respond to her, but it doesn't mean I'll always give her anything she ever wants. I have to break this news to Charlie and Ryan a lot. Charlie understands it a little bit more. And they can turn on me for it. Now you're the enemy, right? I wanted to watch the Boom-Bafoo meltdown, right? I got to take that, I've got to work with it. But I know that they can't see this thing that they're asking for. They can't see the cause and effect of this chain that's going to lead towards whatever, right? Cavities, tummy aches, brain rot from too much TV. Pick your poison. I'm actually still being a really good, attentive parent, and I'm involved when I let my kids eat candy or watch TV, but I won't do it every single day. And in the same request, but it seems to me that Jesus is inviting us to precisely to see prayer in the same relational experience. Right? You can have ask, seek, knock, but you drop it into the context of a caring parent, and suddenly the metaphor evolves. So whatever he means by it, ask, seek, knock, he's not offering a magic genie, a blank check. Jesus is too nuanced for that. But at the same time, I don't want to minimize that he's making a really bold offer. It's like, if the wise parent, the father, right, reserves the right to say no and respond to requests or answer in a different way, like, why doesn't Charlie get unlimited TV? Whatever it is. You might not like it, and Charlie might not like it, but it works because that's actually what I know is good for her. And so he invites us to see prayer coming off in this way, in this setting that begins to get us thinking in new ways about the character of the Father, right? About the way that he interacts with our requests, that we might not get the things we've asked for, but it doesn't mean he's not listening. And that leads us to our second obstacle. And I think this is one, once I say it, you'll go, oh, never. Maybe you thought about it a lot. Maybe it's just because I think too much. But this is a rabbit hole, I think, for me and for a whole bunch of people. So let's say you can get yourself to trust God, that you think God doesn't hate you, but he's actually there for you, and you believe in what Jesus has done, and he's lived his life, and he's loved you and committed to you, and then you start asking this question. You're gonna ask for things. But does God actually change what God is going to do in response to you praying about it? You know what I'm saying? Like, isn't he omni whatever, and he knows all the stuff, and he's all powerful, and he exists whatever, and it's just like, what does it matter if I say it or I don't? Maybe I'm the only person who's jumped down this rabbit hole before. But let's look back a page and just see what he says in chapter 6 when he introduces prayer. Okay, just go back. We're going to see he introduces prayer. He teaches us how to pray, and he said, hey, like verse 5. I'm not going to read it, but you can follow along and see what I'm saying. He introduces and he says things like, hey, don't be like those hypocrites, right? Don't be like those other non-Jewish folks that go on in long prayers because they think that God will hear them. Just pray short prayers. He says, your Father knows what you need before you even ask him. Stop right there and pay attention to your own internal response. Right? Your Father, before you even pray, knows what you need. What's going on right here? I'll tell you what happens when I hear it. If he knows it, then why do I need to do it? If he knows, he's just going to provide it, right? Or if he was good, he would just provide it. Why do I need to ask? Why do I need to ask if God's going to do what God is going to do? So, notice how Jesus draws the exact opposite conclusion from this, though. So we hear it and we go, why do I got to do it if he says he's going to do it anyway? But Jesus continues and he draws an opposite conclusion. He says, the Father knows what you need before you even ask him, so ask him. That's how he wraps it up. So go ahead, ask him. That's the motivation. Are we together on this? What's underneath that is a vision of a God who interacts with the world and who interacts with us and our choices and our decisions. It's a relationship. And I think this is a category breaker for us. I think this is where, this is actually, this is a God that most of us don't have room for when we start to make these images. A God that is genuinely relational and reactive and responsive and interacts with us and our decisions as history goes on and on. That really wants the relationship. So let's just, we're tiptoeing at the top of this like deep rabbit hole of like, why do we have to pray if whatever? Let's go, everyone ready? We're going to put our foot a little farther and we're going to go a little bit deeper in this rabbit hole. It's going to get weirder, okay? We're going a little further down. Let's say, let's just see why I think for many of us this gets harder. Because ideas or visions about who God is, right, not just within Christianity, tend to go towards two different extremes. Okay, towards one extreme, you have a vision over here. Hi, camera, I'm sorry. You have a vision of a God who is Shakespeare. Everyone say, God is Shakespeare. Okay, great. He wrote the play. He's casted the actors. He's got the beginning, the middle, the end, and everybody inside of it is doing their role. Do the actors, the characters inside of the show, know they're inside a show? Right? They don't. They don't know that their role is already written to the very end, do they? They're just, Shakespeare is, he's got Hamlet holding a skull, Hamlet's saying words that Shakespeare wrote. It's not, he feels like he's making decisions in the play, but really it's all been written and it's all controlled, and Shakespeare, God has watched it, he's set the plan in motion, and they're doing what has been foretold in the play of Shakespeare. You with me? That's one extreme, all the way over here. Let's go all the way over to the other extreme. I gotta remember what metaphor I use for this. I use different ones a lot. Oh, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, over here, he's a master chess player. I did this for you, AJ. He's a master chess player, okay? There's pieces on the board, and they're going to move and react. Now, really good chess players, they can imagine the game in front of them. Who's the really good one? Magnus Carlsen, thank you. Sorry, AJ, you got beat to it. Magnus can see however many steps ahead. And so he's reacting to the decisions that other things are happening. So this is the God who's the master chess player. Humans are making decisions, and God's able to foresee how these decisions are going to move to other decisions, and he's able to always stay just steps ahead to make sure what's going to happen. This is the other extreme. You with me over here? With these two extremes, okay? That everything has been written, it's all going to happen however it was, and it's like we're playing a game, but we're always steps behind the one who can see so many steps ahead. This is our two extreme views. Now, between these two extremes, most people tend towards one of these two extremes in Christian history. The problem with either of these extremes, like the problem with this extreme and the problem with this extreme, comes down to one particular thing that we all agree is authoritative and amazing, and it's this thing right here. It's a problem for both of them, the Bible. It creates problems for either of those two extremes. The reason why it causes a problem is because there's tons of people in like this camp, right, that think the Bible actually has this extreme view and it supports it. And then there's people over here who say, well, actually it has this extreme view. But what I found is that if you poke and prod enough, like, why do you only talk about these particular parts of Scripture? Or why do you only talk about these particular ones? You finally find that they ignore or don't pay attention to all these other kinds of passages that kind of don't jive with either of those two extremes terribly well. This is one of those things where if you're comfortable with your view of God and your theology, and you are just completely like, yep, boom, I'm so solidly set, you probably should read the Bible more. Because it'll mess you up. It'll mess up everything you think you believe. Because it doesn't resolve this tension, this dichotomy. It doesn't resolve it. What it does is it places a whole new framework, a whole new way of thinking about it that aren't in these two extremes. And that framework is the one that Jesus is getting at. That it's not Shakespeare who pre-wrote it and is indifferent and is watching this thing happen where humans think they have free will but they really don't. But it's also not over here where there's just indicative free will that we do whatever we want and God's just always positioning in catch-up mode to stay ahead of us. That what we see is this framework that's a relationship. That Jesus has a vision of a Father that is the sovereign. That's directing all things towards his purpose, but has given human beings a degree of genuine freedom and decision making that we can make our ride as bumpy or as smooth as we decide it can be. I'll just say, I'm not even going to try to resolve these two, because these are two of the oldest camps in theology. I can't resolve it. But what I can say is we can set this framework for it that's going to be different. But I don't want to do any more talking. I talk a lot. I'm sorry. I talk a lot. I'm going to play a video from the Bible Project. It's Tim Mackey and John, I can't think of his name, and we're going to go to the very early pages of Scripture. I just think that's so important to get a framework for the narrative of the Bible. You got to go really early on. And I want you to pay attention in this to the story of Israel and how it all comes together in Jesus. Here's why I think this is helpful, right? Nothing to do with prayer at all, but it has everything to do with prayer, though, doesn't it? Like, if you really think about it, the whole story of the Bible is about how God has sovereignly chosen to work out His purpose for all of creation through humans. That God's sovereign choice was to work out His purpose and creation through us. It's a relationship story. So I'm teaching Old Testament. I tell people the story of the Old Testament in particular is God's relationship to humans. If I have a real relationship with my daughters, if I have an actual relationship with Charlie and Ryan, I have certain things that I want to do to shape them. I want them to become people of integrity. I want them to become people who love. I want them to become people who are generous. Think of all those great things. At the same time, as I shape Charlie, as I try to shape Ryan, I have to give them real dignity as human beings who bear God's image. Because the moment I force my agenda on them, it's no longer a relationship. I'm a father that has to learn this balance. When I guide, when do I get involved? When do I allow them to make choices and mistakes and have their own successes? And I know that's just an analogy, but this is what the story of the Bible is trying to tell us. It's a real relationship. It means God's not biting His fingernails, thinking about how things are going to turn out. What He's going to do, He's going to redeem this thing. He's going to do it, and the outcome is as certain as Jesus rising from the dead. But at the same time, He created a real arena, a real creation for relationship and for decisions for us to make, where we can have real failures, we can have real successes, where we can choose to follow and obey, or we can choose to rebel and reject. And what that means is Jesus is inviting us to see obedience as part of a relationship, but that prayer is the crucial part of the partnership. Jesus, it seems, is saying, ask like your Father knows. Right? Ask Him and He'll give you the good things that are right there and that are right for you. They're not things that are going to give you cavities or your teeth or rot your brain and spoil your dinner, right? They're going to be the exact right things that are needed. Jesus says, ask and you will receive. It's really simple math. Ask and you receive. If you don't ask, you don't receive, right? Good. Really simple math. The clear implication of what He's saying is that there may be really good things that God wants to have happen in you or through you or in the world, but it won't happen if you don't ask. How is that not the conclusion that we can draw from this little narrative story? That God will always do beyond what we ask and imagine. But Jesus is giving this invitation that your prayers matter because this is a relationship. Your requests matter. You have the dignity to do these things. Just like obedience matters, your prayer and your faithfulness, all those things matter. Your choices to participate matter. God, if He's really partnering with us as a covenant people, Jesus wants us to see that our prayers matter. So it's silly to say, but I don't think that we really believe it, because we probably straight up don't believe it, because otherwise we would pray a lot more. Just ask yourself this question: do you pray a lot? Like, do you really believe that God wants His kingdom purposes to happen in the world through you and through your prayers for the kingdom? Because if we really believed it, we would probably do it a lot more. And that raises the last question that we're ending with. What should we be asking for? It's really helpful that he taught us on the previous page in the Lord's Prayer. That our prayers are the cry of the kingdom. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. That it's through those prayers of Jesus' disciples that we want to forward that purpose, the kingdom in the world. I read recently, Archbishop of Canterbury put this in the most simple way imaginable, and I love it. And this is how we're gonna end here. When I pray, coincidences happen. When I don't pray, coincidences don't happen. That's what Jesus is inviting us into. That if we really believe and we trust in God's character and we care about things that matter to Him, what do we do then with those experiences when we seem to pray and they hit the floor and bounce back down to us? That we just ask and ask and it never feels like anything is brought to fruition. How do we possibly respond to that? And here's the good news and the bad news. The bad news is the Bible doesn't wrap it up nicely with a bow. Otherwise I'd tell you, I'd give you the answer, and I would have it, and I would make millions of dollars publishing books about how prayers are not answered. But it does address it. It addresses unanswered prayer experience. When we cry out for the kingdom, when we cry out for justice and peace and provision and daily bread and people coming to know Jesus and forgiveness, and nothing comes of it. And the only place that I know to go in those experiences is to remember that it's the same Jesus that said these words, ask, seek, receive, knock, right? That you'll find the same one who said these things as the one who in the Garden of Gethsemane prayed before he was crucified, arrested. He said, if anything is possible for you, right? I don't want to go through this. Take this cup away from me. Was his request answered? He died. But at the same time that he was wrestling with it and making that request, he concludes with this statement, and it's the sum right here, right? This deep relational trust, which is this, how he ends it. At the end of the day, it's not my will, but in your wisdom and grace, whatever your will is, may it be done. He's not opposing the Father's will or trying to shake him into doing, here's my request, but whatever you will. In a place of genuine relationship and relational trust. And Jesus in death and resurrection is the substitute of the faithful covenant partner on our behalf. It is the same time the God with us. That experience of him kneeling in Gethsemane, of the years of praying for someone and something that you just never see the answer to, that Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane is God becoming human and agonizing alongside you in that same experience of unanswered prayer. And while Jesus requests not to go through with it, it wasn't answered in the form that he was requesting. At the same time, was he utterly forsaken and forgotten by the Father? He rose from the dead. He rose from the dead. He was able to see his request through to the other side into resurrection and new creation. You don't know where your 5 years of praying for this person are going. It doesn't seem to be answered in the form that you want it to, but there's loads of reasons it could be. You also don't know the ways that prayer might find final fruition in new creation. Jesus prayed for it, but didn't see the fruition of it until new creation. You have this idea that we're placed as disciples of Jesus in a place of complete trust and hope. And this is how we're going to end. The perfect thing to land to is communion. You're going to take it, and then we're going to clean our chairs, and we're going to get out of here. Because at the communion, you go to meet Jesus at the table, where his death is of significance for us, but also the one that came alongside of us to suffer alongside and to redeem our own agonizing prayer. So as we come up here, whatever it is, right? The lack of faith, the lack of trust in God's character, the intellectual issue of how prayer works, if there's a specific person or a story or something that you've prayed for that seems like it's never been answered, then it comes to Jesus at the table. What forward steps do we need to take as disciples to take Jesus' words here at face value so that prayer can become a way that we see ourselves in a partnered covenant relationship with the Father to bring the kingdom here on earth as it is in heaven?